Hi, everyone. Um, Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Simone, and I'm part of the marketing team at OUP's academic division. And I'm delighted to be here with our guest speakers today, our international panel of experts. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Charles Young, one of our panel co-chairs, so he can do a round of introductions and begin the discussion. And I will disappear behind the scenes. So, Charles, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simone. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this, what I think is going to be a really interesting session. As Simone said, my name is Charles Young. I'm an emergency physician at one of the London teaching hospitals. But for most of my career, in parallel with my clinical practice, I've worked in digital healthcare and in academic healthcare. At the moment, as well as my clinical role, I'm an advisor to the UK's National Institute for Health and Care Research, an advisor to several digital health companies, and I'm editor-in-chief of Oxford University Press's medical journal Research Connections. I'll hand over to Alistair, and then we'll work around the other panelists. So, Alistair, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. So I'm Alistair Dennison. I'm an ophthalmologist in the UK, and I'm Professor of Regulatory Science and Innovation, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's focused on the evaluation and regulation of AI health technologies. So I particularly bring that lens to the discussion today. I do advisory work for particularly the UK regulator MHRA, and I lead the National Commission into the regulation of AI in healthcare for the UK. I'll pass over to Piotr.
Hi, everyone. I'm Piotr Rzechowski. I'm the CEO and founder of Infomedica. We're a clinical decision support company founded in Poland, been around for over 13 years, and we built an AI-powered symptom assessment and care navigation tools that have been used in more than 30 countries and by more than 25 million people globally. We work with national helplines, insurers, health systems, and I spend most of my time at this intersection of clinical safety, AI, and real-world deployments. Probably I'm the least academic person in the room, but I look forward to sharing some of my perspective today.
Thanks very much, Piotr. Serge, let's go to you next, if that's okay.
Is Serge Stinglish. I'm a computer scientist, work computational models, including AI models for pandemic preparedness and response. So I'm currently the head of research at the United Nations University in Macau, in Asia, in China. UNI Macau, for those who don't know, is a global think tank dedicated to research, training, education on digital technologies for sustainable development. And so we are working closely with the UN system and member states to explore how digital technologies, including AI, can address some of the global pressing challenges. And we are also very interested by AI for good and how we can use AI for good for the benefits of all, including marginalized population.
Thank you very much, Serge. Thanks a lot. And Jayanta, over to you.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Charles, and good afternoon or good morning to all our viewers. I am Dr. Jayanta Rai. I'm based at Kolkata, India, and I'm a neurologist by training, and I'm a director of neurology at Manipal Hospital, Kolkata. And as per the topic of today's webinar goes, is India focus. So I'll be presenting my view of healthcare in India and how AI revolves around it. We'll be discussing on that. Thank you very much for joining.
Great, thanks everybody. So Jayanta, as you said, as this is an India-focused event, I think it'd be great if we could start with you. India's got the largest population in the world. It's hugely important in global healthcare. India's been known as the pharmacy of the world and a real pathfinder in digital health. And clearly also, India hosted the AI Impact Summit in healthcare very recently, last month. Over 500,000 people attended. This is just a vast number of people, with really important announcements from organisations like the World Health Organization and Health AI Navigator, and we'll probably touch on those as we come through the discussion. So starting with you, Jayanta, it'd be great if you could kind of set the scene, tell us about the healthcare landscape in India from your perspective as a practicing clinician and a digital healthcare leader, and sort of blend into that what AI is looking like at the moment.
Thanks, Charles. So, as you mentioned, that it's a huge country. So the problem, there are problems for being huge. So first thing is that in India, if you look at the medical system, it's not only the modern medicine or the allopathic system. There are many other systems prevalent, and people use as different practices, homeopathy and Ayurveda, and there are so many other indigenous systems which are in place. So there is a heterogeneity in the medicine practice all over the country. The next very important aspect is the way we divide the healthcare expenses. In one way, we have a private healthcare system which caters almost 70 to 80% of our healthcare, and the rest of the by the government system. And in the private system, majority patients are out of pocket. Almost 30 to 40% people, they spend out of pocket. So this economic divide is also as a very important factor considering our healthcare delivery system in India. And another important point is that the access to the digital systems. Though we do have internet and smartphone available in many parts of our country, but using them for a very particular, purpose-driven thing is not that prevalent. So using that as a healthcare delivery system is not well penetrated as yet in different parts of the country. And another important point I like to mention here is the stakeholders. If you consider the patients are the major stakeholder in the healthcare system, there are others, including the physicians, including the government or the legislators, the private system, which is very strong in India. They are also the stakeholders, and non-governmental organizations, medias. So there are so many stakeholders are present. So all these diversities put together makes this system as more heterogeneous. And on the top of that, the languages spoken in India are in a huge in number. From the north to the south and east and west, I think there are 40, 50 languages, if not more. So this language also divides us in many ways. So I think in one way, this diversity is something which has to be connected to each others. And AI can be a very important tool in connecting those diversities and make this system more homogeneous and more user friendly, so to say, to deliver the healthcare system. And as you mentioned that the recent India AI Summit has addressed many important points here to show the future path of AI in different areas, including the healthcare. And that will be a very interesting thing to discuss at the later part of this webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Janta. That's a really interesting summary. And just touching on that point you mentioned about the heterogeneity of the population in India, do most people in India by number live in urban areas or rural areas? I think it's most people live in rural areas. Is that right?
The rural, mostly in the rural areas. And if you look at the healthcare system, the primary and then to the tertiary care system, the divide is also there. So access to the primary healthcare system in some rural areas is really difficult because of the distance, transport systems, and other physical and geographical barriers. So that is something also very important to bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you think digital health has an impact on rural populations in India as well as in urban populations at the moment, or is that something that's likely to change for the future?
Well, I think this is where the digital healthcare system and most importantly AI has a very important role. And it's not that they're going to replace the physicians or they're going to replace the existing healthcare delivery system. But I think the role of AI should be to walk the extra mile where the human system or the existing systems cannot do. I give you an example.
Yeah.
As I mentioned that in India, we speak different languages, and we Indians by nature, I mean by our system, we speak at least 2 to 3 languages. So this multilingual system has also some difficulties to capture the way we express our problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a really interesting point about the way people, as you've said, express their healthcare problems.
A way they express. I mean, in 2 different languages, how they express pain, it's different. So the problem with AI is to capturing the data and giving the diverse way of expression, the capturing the data and then translating into analytics and then delivering into a specific action point is another challenging part in the system. So what I believe that at least for now, human intermediaries are important who will capture the informations from the people and which can be a base level healthcare workers who can capture their emotions, their language, their nuances, and then they feed into the system rather than directly capturing from the patients, given their diversity in expression and other things, will be a real challenge. So a human guided and human driven data capturing and then developing into a system will be a more appropriate thing in Indian context, which will be easier to develop, and then it can be tested and eventually applied into the society.
And that's a really it's a very important point, Joan. So thank you, and it's also a good segue to lead us into a more academic discussion about research. So in the context of what you said, in terms of the vast scale of India, the huge population size, and the diversity within the Indian population, what's your view about how academic research can be stimulated to help really drive important outcomes in healthcare using AI? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think this is where we really need to start from the beginning. And since AI is a new thing, it's now is developing all over the world, including my country. So it's not a part of any curriculum from the high school level onwards, which should be. And it's not about learning the technology of AI, rather positioning of AI in our life, how we use AI, how we apply AI in different parts of our life, including the education, including the work. That knowledge and perspective should be given from a high school level, I believe, and later on, so that we learn to live with AI, you learn to use AI intelligently, and
Yes.
then make our, I think, work and life easier. So, and from there, the research starts, and without capturing a good quality data, the research falls apart. So I think data capturing is very important, and then without understanding the diversity, the data capturing will be again a difficult thing. So I think capturing the data, good quality data, and transferring into analytics and research will be another very interesting, a very important part to take it forward.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. And you've mentioned a range of different disciplines that need to interact to achieve that goal. And so, as you come from a very interdisciplinary research background, what are your thoughts about the importance of interdisciplinary research in this context in Indian healthcare with an AI focus specifically?
Thank you for the question, Charles. Yeah, I totally agree with Jayanta when he mentions the related to diversity inside the Indian population. So when you have different background, different languages, so it's very important to have this kind of diverse perspective when you are building AI solution, because at the end, if we don't pay attention, this AI system in healthcare, they can affect the real people's life, and they can amplify existing bias. So this is what we are doing in my research team. We want to build effective AI system, and you want to co-design the system with people with different expertise. So data scientists, clinicians, ethicists, public health experts, economists, etc., that can address the risk and the needs like safety, fairness across population, privacy, accountability issues more easily. So it's very important to bring all these viewpoints together to have a more accurate and trustworthy AI system at the end, and a system that works not only in the lab, because it's quite easy to have a system working in the lab, but also in practice. So we need definitely tools that support equitable decisions. We don't want to have tools that reinforce existing health disparities. Another way to do that also is to include the citizen in the loop. So when you want to design AI-based predictive engines, so you probably know about citizen science approach, but in citizen science approach, you just ask the citizen to collect data, but you can go further. And in my research team, for example, we have been using a specific methodology called participatory modeling, where so it's a collaborative approach where you try to engage the stakeholders, the citizen, in the design of computational models, including AI models. So it's very different from the traditional top-down approach because you try to involve local communities, policymakers, all together to have a kind of shared representation of the problems and the problem solution. Because sometimes the people might have different views on different solutions or different problems. And we use this approach in a project in 2024 in the pilot study. So it was not in India, but in 3 countries, Vietnam, Kenya, Brazil, where we tried to address how the local communities, they can manage patients and resources available in hospitals and surrounding during pandemic time. And based on that, we built an AI-based simulation in order to simulate not only the disease dynamic, because this is quite easy to do that, but also the citizen well-being.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And do you think that learning that you've gained from that citizen participation in those other countries, is that exportable into an Indian context? And if it is, can that be helped to drive research in this area to help inform other people how to develop systems that really facilitate healthcare for everyone?
Yeah, this is definitely an approach that can be used in many different contexts. I guess the only concerns is that because this is an approach with people, so you need to have access to people, and depending on the culture, you might have people who are more inclined to participate to this kind of activities. But this is something that we can use everywhere, yeah, for sure.
And I'm just sort of moving towards our next discussion point. Do you think that medical journals, I've got my kind of journal editor hat on here, can medical journals do more to facilitate that kind of transition of involving participants more accurately or more actively in algorithm development? How do we, as an editor, how do I know which articles to publish to drive that kind of change?
I think you need to maybe facilitate this kind of publications, because most of the time the people, they are interested by the journals are interested by theoretical results or but maybe not something that is where people are more involved. So I know there are journals that are more they can accept this kind of submissions, but most of the time they don't want to have something that where you have a mix of different approaches and especially when people are involved.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And Piotr, I think that will lead on to you've obviously got a lot of expertise in the sort of the application of AI systems in real life and deploying them in many different locations globally. From a publication perspective, what sort of publications do you find useful in your work, and how do we do more of those to drive progress in this area?
Thank you, Charles. So I think there is a big gap between marketing research and independent peer-reviewed research. And that gap, I think, matters a lot in healthcare applications. Maybe some of you recall a company called Babylon Health. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, they published a bold claim that their AI outperformed doctors. They got a lot of press, but those studies were internal, not independently validated. The company collapsed for different reasons, but that's a cautionary tale, I would say. And now I feel we are seeing a similar pattern. If you look at Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, they all have healthcare divisions. The main output, however, is case studies, blog posts, not so much peer-reviewed evidence, but people treat them like gold. And meanwhile, a recent study from Mount Sinai, published in Nature Medicine, tested ChatGPT on structured triage cases. And very interesting novel study with a new methodology. Sorry, and results were quite concerning. And that's the kind of study I really find useful, because you have independent team, real population relevant cases, transparent methods published in a top tier journal, and there is no commercial incentive to make the results look good. So my general advice is always asking who ran the study, was it published in a peer-reviewed journal, and does it really reflect real-world conditions?
Okay, that's very interesting. And building on what Serge was talking about a minute ago, maybe we could add into that list the importance of involvement of patients and lay people in that kind of research, as well as your really valid points about it being peer reviewed and independent and without a clear financial gain. Serge, coming back to you on that point then, in terms of disruption linked to AI in peer review research, what are your views on that? Because we're talking here about research to drive or to facilitate the use of AI in healthcare, but clearly AI also has an impact on the research process, both in terms of doing the research itself and on its peer review. So what are your views in that context?
Yeah, this is. I agree with that, Charles. It's AI is disrupting everything, including peer review research, because at the same time, the AI tools that can now generate manuscript and quite good manuscript actually sometimes, and you can also automate on the other side the peer reviews of these manuscripts. So you increase the volume of submission for journal and conferences, and the potential errors, hallucinations, or fake citations. And just want to give you this example of this International Conference on Machine Learning in 2026. They received more than 24,000 submitted papers, so more than doubling than the previous year. So this is incredible. This is insane for the whole community. It's a real problem, because no conference organizer can cope with this growth. So it's impossible to find reviewers, because it's not possible to find that amount of reviewers for more than 24,000 papers. And there are also concerns with the AI research published by big tech companies, because sometimes they publish a lots of papers that looks like papers that they release on their website. But there is no peer review process, and I understand that for them it's very important to publish as soon as possible, so the results, so they can compete with the other one. But at the same time, this is quite it's very difficult in terms of the credibility of such work. Yeah.
And so that's very interesting, and that links to what Piotr was saying about the importance of established medical journals in this context, in doing a good peer review process, taking an independent view of the research, and really publishing results that clinicians and others can trust. And that's to your point about the potential conflicts in some other information that's available. Oxford University Press did a really big study of peer reviewers' attitudes recently, more than 4,000 peer reviewers, and it was surprising that only about 25% of those people said they use AI in their peer review process. So when they're doing a review, only about a quarter of them said they used AI. So do you use AI when you're doing peer review, and what do you think about that as a concept?
Not that much. I try to avoid. Maybe I'm old school.
Well, you know, you're aligning with the majority of the people that we talk to, so not old school.
I try to avoid to use AI except for polishing my manuscript a little bit to English of my manuscript, because I'm not an English native speaker for sure. So I'm using AI mostly for that. I try to avoid the AI for creative ideas, because most of the time it doesn't work, or
Doesn't work.
it's a bit,
Exactly.
or it is a little bit too creative for me.
Yeah, agreed. And I just pulling this back a bit to where we started off the discussion, because it's fascinating the direction we're heading in. The conversation we're having about the validity of published research, or the validity of available information, and how peer review is super important in that context. It kind of presupposes that we're researching the right areas. But in a country like India, with well over 1.4 billion people, understanding the needs of that population and its diversity, as Jayanta has told us about, is really hard. You know, that's bigger than I can think about in terms of a challenge. So Jayanta, you know, what are your expert views, both as a digital health leader and as a clinician, in terms of how we can really understand healthcare needs of people and feed that understanding into the development cycle and subsequently the publication cycle of that research?
Well, I think that's very important. And as I mentioned that, I'm very glad that our government has taken up AI very seriously, and they're now doing very systematically to position AI in our governance as a whole. And if you allow me to mention a couple of points, initiative 2, one, they call it Safe and Ethical AI in Healthcare Initiative. The acronym is a SAHI, SAHI. SAHI means correct in Indian language. And the other one is called BODH, which is Benchmarking Open Data Platform from Health AI. They call it BODH, both. Both means realization, in Sanskrit language. So these two things really allow us to do ethical research in the AI system without going into the individual patient data. So whoever is trying to try a AI model in healthcare system, they might use this data without going into the individual patient data, and that will help us in the future research. And so these are the two initiatives among many the government has taken. They were very futuristic, I believe. But I think the most important part in our country to apply AI is to educate people about what is AI. Now I will give you an example. We had analog TV, then it goes to LCD, now it goes to smart TV, now it goes to AI TV. And people don't understand what is the transition, and are they really that smart or not? So someone was asking me on a lighter note that what is the antonym of AI or artificial intelligence? Someone told me it's called natural stupidity. So, so we should not encourage our natural stupidity to position AI in such a positions that we feel a little awkward later on. So I think at this moment, application of AI and with human interventions and with ethical boundaries, proper legislations, accountability fixing are important, then we can probably apply, especially in terms of healthcare delivery system, so that it can go to the last person in the system and without increasing the cost very asymmetrically. So AI is not something, it's a luxury. It's a tool which can be used to bridge the gap, not increase the gap. So I think that should be the way to look at it. And I think there is an immense potential of using AI to walk the last mile and close the digital divide and the delivery system, and can give us a good clinical outcome by interposing trained humans. Physicians are short in number in India as yet, but trained humans, healthcare workers are abundant. So training them and getting the data capturing them as per the diversity of the data, and then feeding into the system, and then we figure out how we deliver it. I think this is the way the research should go, and probably more worthwhile.
So in that's really good. And in that context, then you're talking about using AI also to help understand the needs of really broad, diverse, geographically dispersed populations, and feed those needs into the research process and then algorithm development. Is that correct?
Exactly. I give another quick example. We do have a lot of epidemics happening in India: malaria epidemic, dengue fever epidemic, diarrhea. So many epidemics happening in different parts of the country. So keeping the data of these epidemics and giving us ideas about how we control the epidemics at the quick possible time, based on the data captured in different parts of the country, is one of the ways to use AI and help us in the policy making and planning.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. That's very interesting. And you mentioned the shortage of practitioners there, of doctors in India relative to the population scale and size. I know, Piotr, that in Informatica you employ quite a large number of doctors actually to help with algorithm development. So you obviously feel that their involvement in the development, practicing clinicians like myself, their involvement in the development of AI algorithms is important. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I think we had well over 100 or a few hundred doctors involved in building the system over the past 13, 14 years. We even tried to measure the investment amount. I think we are at around 150,000 hours cumulatively of like doctor physician work invested into validating, training, and curating the model. And I would say it might be obvious, but I really think that building AI in healthcare should involve clinicians from day one. This is not the principle that every company, especially early stage startups, would take. And not bringing clinicians as advisors just at the end when you want to sell something, but just really starting from the beginning and understanding the problem you want to solve and why you want to solve it. It's actually one of the favorite comments of our founding chief medical officer, that in startup world, you will sometimes have chief medical officers who have not even graduated from medical university, but they're already chief medical officers. And too often, the ideas are abstract and sometimes disconnected from daily practice if you don't involve clinicians in the actual design of the problem you want to solve. However, especially last year, we saw a few really great, in my opinion, examples of where AI truly meets a need. Think, for example, about ambient scribing. Tools such as Heidi, Nabla, Abridge in the US. Ambient scribing seems to be super helpful when it comes to documentation. Studies are beginning to show that they can help clinicians, doctors focus more on the patient more than documentation. But of course, they also introduced some problems. Or another one being Open Evidence, very successful company, which brings clinical evidence to the point of care. And these tools really solve a clear problem, in my opinion. I also think it's not only about whether you can build the product and not only about the technology behind it. It's also about, or maybe even more oftentimes, about whether the people and the system is ready to use such technology. So clinicians need to trust the tool, understand the role of the tool, and be willing to change how they practice, how this typical encounter or consultation looks like. And I think this is a social or adaptive challenge, not just a technical one.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And if I just sort of flip to my experience, with from a clinician's point of view, and Janta's point about the shortage of clinicians, I think is important here because that's a global problem, not limited to India. It is difficult adapting to new workflows when you're already maxed out on your bandwidth, you've got too many patients to see and not enough hours to see them. Evolving into a new workflow clinically is much harder than it would be if you're not so busy. So it feels to me like there needs to be sometimes a meeting point between AI systems being designed to fit in with existing clinical workflows, but also adjusting those workflows occasionally to fit in with advances that AI can potentiate. Getting that balance right is easy, but is important, but not easy in super busy clinical environments. But that's so we've talked a lot about clinicians there and their involvement. Serge, coming back to you and your point about citizen involvement, is that important in AI algorithm building as well?
Yes, so I already mentioned that there is a need for more human-centric participatory approach for AI, where we can try to prioritize human values, human needs, well-being. And the idea is not to replace humans by machine, but maybe try to foster a kind of collaboration between humans and AI. And sometimes maybe there are some solutions where there is no need for AI. Actually, maybe we can decide that yeah, it's not there is no need to use the AI for everything. Yeah. So Jayanta was talking previously about closing the digital divide, bridging the last mile, and I think one solution to ensure that healthcare needs came first is maybe also to prioritize low-cost edge AI solutions. So, for example, for remote citizen or for areas without access to internet. So, and when I'm talking about edge AI, is the idea that you can use AI on local low-cost devices to process the data in real time and without relying on external cloud computing. So because maybe you have no access to this kind of facilities. And this kind of technologies is very interesting, I guess, in the context of countries like India, because you have faster decision makings and you can also ensure the data privacy of by keeping all the sensitive information close to the patients, actually.
Yeah, okay, and I understand that, clearly that's very important from a conceptual perspective, but it's still, it's so easy to talk about these things in abstract, and I think so difficult to put them into practice in context. And this is where, Jayanta's points about the vast number of languages spoken in India and the way the population is more rural than urban. Jayanta, what are the practical ways that you can see to achieve those points that Serge has just been mentioning about citizen involvement?
I think at this moment, if you look at the current practice of AI or AI-assisted healthcare delivery system in India, imaging areas, I mean, especially when people reach out to a distant radiologist to get interpretation, and in oncology, in pharmacy, and there are a few more areas where it currently is being used. But I think there are many other areas, especially when in the decision-making process in the emergency situation. I mean, you imagine a scenario: a patient goes into a labor in a primary healthcare center where it's not well equipped with deal with a complex labor patient. So dealing with that different parameters and making a decision and triaging the patient for transfer to another center, and which applies to any other emergencies, including neurological and other emergencies, is very important. So triaging at a lower level is a very important, where the imaging data, the lab data, and the clinical data are integrated, and gives them an idea about how bad or how safe is that to keep or to transfer. I think this is a human interference. Our human involvement at this stage is highly emotional, and as I told, that the social pressure is also too much in a peripheral center. So in a system-driven thing, people will probably understand better, and the error margin might be less. So this is one area is very important in emergency situation. And of course, down the line, electronic health data, I mean EMR or EHR, which is in one way non-existent in many parts of the country, which is very important to understand the disease process and their outcome. So this might capture more data from input channels or clarity on the thing. So I think these are the two areas can be hugely helpful to initiate application of this in our system, and then we develop on that.
Thank you, Janta. And your point about triage there is well made. And Piotr, we're lucky to have Piotr because he's a world expert on AI-enabled healthcare triage. And I think, from my perspective, a key aspect to that is trust. You have to trust the algorithm that's providing you with those triage suggestions or guidance, because as you say, Janta, in an emergency situation, those decisions can be life or death decisions. So Piotr, what's your views on building that trust in an AI system that would allow clinicians, like myself or Janta, to really use the output to make those very important triage type choices?
Thank you. So I think there are two main questions. First of all, can you explain how AI made the decision? And second question, who takes responsibility if it's wrong? There are fundamentally two different approaches. One is black box models, like large language models. They can generate answers that sound very confident, but cannot really show their exact reasoning. They're difficult to audit. You cannot trace why a specific recommendation was made in such a large neural model. And secondly, there are more of a translucent or white box models, which are purpose-built systems with explainability established by design. Every recommendation would come with a reasoning trail, what symptoms were reported in triage, what conditions were considered, why this particular triage recommendation was chosen. And then Dr. Jayanta or you, Charles, could have a look and understand why the particular reasoning happened, mainly relying on probabilistic or Bayesian reasoning, which is typically the foundation of such systems. And now there is a harder question, I think. When an AI system gives someone medical advice and it's wrong, who's responsible? Is it the patient, the tech company, the health system that deployed it? Nobody really knows, and I feel there is no clear framework for that yet. In European Union, at least, there is the medical device regulation that forces some level of clarity, of course, as well in the UK. And some countries, maybe even majority of countries in the world. And it's pretty straightforward. If you certified something as a medical device, there is a regulatory body checking your work, your adherence to quality processes, and the manufacturer carries accountability. This is not the case in the US, for instance, when we think about triaging systems. And this is definitely not the case for ChatGPT or Claude for healthcare and those major general purpose AI companies that are not certified as medical devices, do not have quality management systems, and clinical validation is vastly undefined or unknown to the general public.
So yeah, that's very interesting. So partly trusted to do with the algorithm development. So that's on the developer, if you like. But partly it's a broader consideration to do with whether people trust the regulation or the regulatory frameworks within which that development happens. And I guess that brings us back to the publication of the results, whether we believe the validation of those things. So that's those are really interesting points. Janta, and I guess thinking back to the AI Impact Summit in India, what's the kind of regulatory landscape in India in terms of algorithm development or, in fact, implementation, AI algorithm in healthcare?
At this moment, we are exactly in the same position as Piotr was just mentioned. It's not clear who, at this moment, is the physician. We are the final line. So anything happens, whatever you use a robot, use an AI tool, or finally it's you who gets sued. So I think at this moment, it's completely on the physician who is delivering it. But I think, down the line, we should have more clarity on that. And it's an ever-changing process. So it's more dynamic. So I think it will keep changing all over the world, including India. So unless that happens, it's again the pressure is on the healthcare physician. I mean the worker or the physician who is using it on the ground and taking responsibility of whatever interpretation is coming through the AI channel, and apply to the patient. So as of now, it's still there.
So that's an open question for us as a society to figure out, I guess. Do you think that, I was just thinking when you're speaking, it's really interesting what you're saying. I was kind of thinking about me in an emergency department making decisions. Do you think that's right? Is it always going to be the clinician who takes final responsibility, or is there a potential in the future to kind of discharge some of that responsibility to a system that I've relied on to make a decision? What's your clinical view on that?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the patient is a human being and I am a human being.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I think this will remain, and that's a constant. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
So and the emotion, everything is cannot captured by a data. Whatever amount of data we capture, we will miss some nuances. So finally, at the delivery point, especially in emergent situations, I'm not talking about changing someone's insulin dose based on their blood glucose parameters. That may be a little bit structured thing in many patients, not 100%, but in a majority. But in acute medicine situation, it's still a human being who can be helped with AI, of course, to decrease our cognitive load. We gather all the data, clinical imaging and everything in a very quick succession, and then we make a decision faster. But final, it's my call to decide whether I thrombolize the patient or not. It's my call finally. It's not pop-up comes from the computer.
Yeah.
Give the injection, and I give the injection, and then I think the reverse way.
Yeah,
So you are a physician. You might understand my point.
I agree with you. Yeah. I think that's right. And that humanistic aspect of it that you said, that you expressed that very eloquently. That's exactly right, I think. So I'm conscious of time. We're going to move on to our last discussion sort of area before we go to the question and answer session. And I just wanted to touch sort of to round up by thinking about the implementation of systems. So we've talked a lot about the needs of the largest country in the world in terms of population, so India. We've talked about the way algorithms need to be developed and regulated, but this concept about implementation science, I think, is massively important because clearly, that's fundamental to having the algorithms work in an effective kind of way. So Serge, from your kind of multidisciplinary perspective, what are some key messages about implementation requirements for the development of AI systems in healthcare? How do you approach that from a multidisciplinary perspective?
I think there are lots of issues because every time you try to use an existing AI system, there is always the risk that you might have some issues because there's a need to contextualize a little bit the AI to the specific needs of the countries, of the culture. So it's quite difficult because lots of organization, they just buy some AI systems from some companies and they try to apply this, and it is not working because you need to took into consideration the local context. So, and the issue with AI models in some regions is that sometimes there is a lack of data, so it's not possible to use AI, and because we all know that if we want to use these very big neural networks, these gigantic neural networks with billions of neurons inside, we need to feed them with lots of data. And so it's interesting because the digital divide nowadays is not only about the internet connectivity, but it also have an implication in terms of the representation and the heterogeneity of the data sets and the scarcity of data in some region of the world. So, and one solution that we come up with at UNU is the idea of using synthetic data. So synthetic data is the idea that when you don't have enough data, you can create data, not random data, but you try to reproduce some structural and statistical properties of real-world data. And so, and we were talking about previously, I think Jayanta was talking about patient electronic health records. You can produce synthetic, very useful. And we released in 2024 a policy brief with the director of the UNU and another colleague on what kind of policies the member states should put in place in order to go under the creation, the use, and the dissemination of synthetic data. And I guess this is something that the people will use more and more in the future in the context of health, because it's a very good instrument in order to protect the privacy of the individuals. But at the same time, it's always like that. At the same time, you have also new challenges. You might see maybe some reproduction of bias. You might see some issues related to the quality of data. So it's because the synthetic data will maybe be released on the internet, so it will be used to train other kinds of algorithms. So there are lots of issues that you have to take into account when you are dealing with this kind of system.
Fascinating. That's very helpful, Soj. Thank you. And so just to wrap up this discussion section before we move on to question and answers, Piotr, coming to you finally. As someone who's done this, what's your if you're going to tell people one message about the importance of deploying a new AI system in a healthcare environment? So what's your one implementation message for everyone to take away?
Oh wow, really difficult to choose just one, but that I would go for this. Somebody has to pay for it. So economics. I mean, in many markets, the funding model for digital health isn't clear. Is it the government? Is it the insurer? Is it the hospital? Is it the patient? And until that's sorted, scaling is harder because it takes literally years. It takes years before you sign a contract, a partnership, or cooperation with either public or private partner. So economics, despite all of the great studies results, ROI you can prove, it's not easy to demonstrate that this is a good investment still.
Very, very interesting. And it's interesting, actually. I hadn't really noticed it, but we've had this whole conversation without talking about money at all. And obviously, money is a real driver for this, obviously.
That
but
was
your point there. So thank you for bringing us back to reality. But your point is well made. And just sort of reading between the lines, generating those funding models is dependent on the publication of high quality data, right? In as you've all said, in peer-reviewed journals that people believe and that go through a very rigorous peer review process. That's fundamental to ensuring funders feel confident in they're investing their money wisely and consequently driving important deployments. Okay, so we're out of time for the discussion section. Thank you for that. That was a really interesting conversation. Simone is going to put a poll in the background for the audience to vote on. And while that's happening, Alistair, I'll hand over to you for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, and everybody. That was a really great discussion. So I'm going to leave the poll open for a little while, and we'll take our first few questions, and then we'll come back to the poll results. Actually, what's been great is seeing the questions coming in, and they're all brilliant questions. We won't have time for all of them. Some of them have, to some extent, been answered actually as the conversation progressed. But I wonder, Jayanta, whether you might take this first one from Prajwal Pidasani. To Jayanta, thanks for the wonderful insights. Just a quick question. How can we systematize AI in clinical practice in high volume centers with large patient flows? Do you think it's even feasible to tailor into our government hospitals across Southeast Asia? So Jayanta, if you go first with that, and then others can come in if they wish.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. And this is where it's all about using that at a large scale. So whatever tool you use, I mean, in AI, I think in a big hospital, using that is definitely important. But implementation will be a big challenge, especially how the system captures everything together and process it through the system, and then giving the end result to decide about the outcome or the treatment. It's a big challenge, but it should be tested on a smaller model to see how it works, especially in resource setting model, because the diversity again in the resources. Some centers might not have even the basic requirements of investigations and other things. In a resource poor setting, when we heavily depend on the clinical data and limited investigations, then the accuracy of the clinical data will determine how successful the system would be. So that can be tested in a resource poor setting to see whether that really helps in our country, especially, or in similar kind of countries.
And Janta, just staying with you for a moment, it's perhaps linked to the previous question from Sri Jamal. I'd like to please ask, how can AI be used to help the poorest people in India? Thank you.
I think this is what the government deliberated on that at length during the AI summit. And this is exactly the whole objective should be, that go to the last mile and do it. I think developing and testing models which are not asset heavy or heavily dependent on technologies. It's a simple point of care using the digital access is the way to reach the farthest corner of the country, where they can be helped with not, I'm talking about complex things, but say just public health care, just hypertension control, diabetes control. I think those are the areas of very important. Antenatal care, the preventive medicine, and public health system. Their use of AI will be very, appropriate to prevent diseases rather than taking up a complex case and then dealing by using an AI. So preventive and public health care will be a more appropriate area to go to the farthest corner of the country, and then we can help the poorest.
Thanks, Janta. I'm about to go on to the next question, unless Charles, Pieter, either of you want to come in on either of the discussions.
Maybe I can chime in real quick. This will be more generic, not specifically in India, but what I really believe in is that much can be done to support self-care by providing people with better tools than Googling and searching online. And as we know, people are already turning to ChatGPT. I think there are like 250 million health queries every single week, which is absolutely crazy. And by working with national health systems and governments, we see that there's like an increased interest in deploying clinically validated and certified technology, which again is explainable and that can be configured to certain needs. So perhaps there could be a model that is built specifically for India, taking into account all the requirements and that Dr. Jayanta mentioned related to languages, understanding of patient needs, prevalence of conditions. I'm sure that tool is coming. What would be the distribution model? Is it a voice bot? Is it a WhatsApp application? Is it something distributed more globally? I don't know, but hopefully we'll have some self-care assisting bots so that people will be able to take care of themselves better at home than they do now.
Thanks. Charles, do you want to come in?
Yeah, and from my perspective, I'm kind of thinking about this from a research point of view with my academic hat on. And at Research Connections, we're very focused on looking for the type of research that facilitates that kind of understanding. So we're very focused on quality, we're very focused on methodological rigor, but we're not really that worried about novelty always. And we're really looking for research publications which would drive understanding of how we can use AI in a practical way to help urban and rural populations in India. And that's difficult from an editor's perspective because we get lots of submissions. So picking out the right ones and supporting the authors in their publication process for these really important global questions, that's one of the challenges I have to deal with. And I think it's part of this journey that we're all moving through to deploy systems in a way, algorithms in a way that really help everybody, not super select groups of patients.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, everyone. I'm going to go to a question from Dominic Matthew, which we touched on in part, but actually I would like to just dig into it a bit. It's and Peter, I may come to you first. Can you give us an idea of the current AI tools available to healthcare practitioners to help improve accuracy of diagnosis and effectiveness of treatment planning, disease progress prediction, and so on? I mean, I would take that question to be, don't necessarily be constrained to those particular subheadings, but more, we talk a lot about AI in a generic way, but what are the actual tools that we are seeing that actually could be making a difference to sort of healthcare? Peter, do you want to take that first?
Of course, and keep in mind, obviously, I'm not a physician, I'm not a doctor, but according to my knowledge, one of the most successful tools recently, and actually one of the most successful digital health companies in the history, is Open Evidence. So Open Evidence is US based, and what they do, they turned up to date and those like traditional repositories of medical information into Gen AI tool that only relies on curated, clinically validated journal quality sources. I think the usage, the application, I don't want to provide any incorrect estimations, but a solid chunk of US-based physicians already rely on Open Evidence for clinical decision support. There are obviously other models, but this one is the biggest one that I'm aware of. All of those traditional publishers, if you think about Wolters Kluwer's, Merck, they are also trying to blend in generative AI to improve the way you can search and retrieve clinical information, differential diagnosis, treatment planning. So we will see more, but Open Evidence is definitely something I would recommend checking out.
Anybody else want to come in on that?
I was thinking about it with a slightly different view, actually, Alistair. That question was very focused on clinical applications, I think. But in terms of helping healthcare more broadly, I think there's a currently underplayed value or potential value for AI in the use of the administrative processes in healthcare delivery systems. So there are clearly clinical applications, as we've discussed. Triage is foremost among those. But I'm really interested in this idea of optimizing the healthcare system as a whole using AI to look at things which often are considered boring, like waiting list management or clinic scheduling or operation scheduling. They're not boring at all. They're fundamentally important in the delivery of healthcare overall within a system. And they translate directly into improving outcomes that matter for patients. So I think that in these conversations, we shouldn't just focus on what's viewed as kind of clinical applications. Clinical is broader in this context, and it involves all of the components that are required to get a healthcare system working effectively and to really optimize models of care delivery.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. And actually, I'm going to come to you, still linked to that previous question, but also going to a question from Anshuman Bhattacharya. When AI tools are introduced into acute stroke care, where do you think they add the most value? There's a second part of the question, which is I'm also curious where clinical judgment will always remain the final decision maker. Now, we've touched on that second bit quite a bit through the wider discussion. So I think I'm particularly focused on that first part of the question.
Yeah, I think we are already using some AI tool for acute stroke imaging part, like Rapid AI or Viz AI. There are several platforms available even in India. Even I have experience in using that. It's not that I take it everything from them. I usually apply my judgment on that. But yes, it's helpful in giving a quick turnaround time to give you a processed image, which helps me. But finally, yes, it's me only who decides, because this is where the fine line between evidence and your application the varies. Your patient may not be included in any of those trials in the inclusion criteria. It may be a little different with a lot of other factors. So it's your clinical judgment which is important at the end of the day. But it helps in scenario where a stroke neurologist or a neurologist is not available. It's a ear physician based triaging system or acute stroke delivery system, where these imaging tools are really helpful. And especially when a busy hospital, a lot of patients are there. So they are useful, but finally a physician's decision is still important. It's not the only machine which decides the last point.
Thank you. Why don't we, because we're drawing towards the end, Simone, would you be able to put the poll results up? It'd be very interesting to see. You said, I think that using AI will make care quality better, 75%, make it worse, 7%, make no difference, 4%, and I don't know, 14%. Very interesting. Thank you, everybody who participated in that. That takes me to what I think will be our last question, which is, how should we address fear of replacement in healthcare? Thank you, Pooja Nair, for that one. And the reason I wanted to go to the poll first was also just to see how we thought AI was going to impact healthcare. But who wants to take the fear of replacement question?
Well, I think we all can respond if we have time quickly. So everyone's perspective is interesting to know that. I think in my perspective is there is no fear of the physician to be completely replaced. Well, it might help you to ease your work, and we should learn how to use AI in our life, starting from your training system and go upwards, so that you learn to coexist in a symbiotic way with AI, rather than it overpowers you eventually, and you lose your critical thinking. I think retaining your critical thinking, judgment, and improving on that parallelly is important to use AI intelligently as a side. Some areas it reduces your legwork. Some areas it reduces your cognitive load, so you can use better your brain in more effective way in some other important areas. But you are going to stay as a physician. I believe I'm going to stay. Nobody can take away my role or my final decision making, I would say, the capability or the faculty to replace myself, at least in near future. Your views.
Thanks, Jayanta. Charles, I think you're going to come in.
Yeah. It's an excellent question. I think it's well established that healthcare systems globally are struggling with demand and complexity. So my fear is not of being replaced as a clinician, it's of not getting enough support and being overwhelmed by patients. So as we've said, the AI use in healthcare is super complex. There are manifold considerations, but really I'm looking to it for part of the solution of the current volume and complexity challenge we're all facing currently.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Any last points on the fear of replacement question from Pieter or Serge?
Yeah, so I will risk being unpopular here, and I'm not worried at all about replacement. I think that's not going to happen, but I think it's going to be similar to self-driving cars. I'm absolutely confident that in a few years from now, AI will be entitled to make medical diagnoses for a certain area of conditions, not all of them, the most basic ones. Basically, what a doctor can do over phone without seeing a patient perhaps, or doing the physical examination, that could be the area of low acuity conditions that I think will become certified as medical devices.
Thanks, Pieter. Serge?
I think there's no fear to be replaced for any kinds of creative knowledge workers. I think because when you try, and this is what we do a lot, when you try to explain how AI systems are working, actually the people are a bit surprised because they always think that this is a kind of rational system and you can interact with the system and this is a smart system. Yeah, for sure. But when you understand the basic how it works from the basic concept, it's quite surprising for lots of people, and they realize that okay, this is something interesting, but they should pay attention to not to use too much this kind of system, because there's another issue that we didn't address during this panel, but there are more and more mental health issues related to the use of AI, especially for the young people. They use AI for doing everything, and they are for sure discharging a lot of their cognitive load, but too much on the system, and then we might expect a lot of mental health issues in the future.
Mm. Yeah, and as I just hand back to Charles, just to draw us to close, I think the last comment from me on this as well is the idea that we want to be steering this rather than fearing this. And I think it's a great quote. I wish it was one of my phrases, but I'm afraid I heard it secondhand. But I think it's a really helpful phrase to have in mind. And I think the other thing from my point of view is an analogy I do quite often use is that, you know, that this plane is already in flight. You know, it's not something that we kind of decide, oh, well, do we want to go down this path or not? But we are already on this path, and it is about shaping the future of what we want that AI-enabled healthcare system to look like. So I think my thanks to all of you who've sent questions in. I'm sorry we couldn't get to more of them. They were all brilliant questions. And thank you for your insights on this call. Back to you, Charles.
Well, I've got nothing further to add, really, Alistair. I think you summed it up brilliantly there. I'd also like to thank all of our panelists for a really interesting discussion with some very important points that we've covered. And to all of you in the audience, thank you for joining. And as Alistair said, for your questions. So thank you once again, everyone. We're going to draw the webinar to a close now, but it's been a great session. So yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.